Gentlemen, welcome to For the Republic. You ready to start? Okay. I'll take the silence. Oh, was that a thumb?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just checking. Okay. Ooh, two thumbs. Love it. Alan Myers here. This is another episode of For the Republic. Welcome to the program. Got Douglas V Gibbs, Mr. Constitution, and Brady. Oh yeah, the war hamster. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
All
My
right.
pleasure.
So yeah, we're going to start with a little whackadoodle news, right? What else? And
Isn't all news whackadoodle at this point?
very close.
I've got some news tonight that's a little bit less whackadoodle.
Really?
Yeah, we actually have some good news on the horizon again.
All right.
And thanks, Sons of Liberty, for the dancing cockroach. I'm watching the chat.
Thank you for doing that. All right. Now, recently, there apparently was some significant football game. Doug, was there? I know you're a sport.
Yeah, that's what they say. And actually, I enjoyed it. And if you weren't a fan of either team, it was a great game. If you were a fan of either team, it was a very stressful situation all the way to the end.
Well, for those who are tracking other things, this is what was going.
Other things.
There was something else going on outside the game. Whoa.
Yeah.
And that is the number of private jets that flew into Vegas over the weekend. Now, this is not the record. The last year's game was the record at 931 private jets. This one was pretty close at 882. Now, that's more than the 4 airports around Las Vegas can handle. So some of the flights had to be a stop, drop, and go somewhere else because they couldn't keep them all there. The interesting thing about these private jets, because we're talking about these people care about the environment, right? Absolutely. Well, according to this article, flying in a private jet is the most carbon polluting way to travel. Now, the problem I don't like the term carbon polluting because if you're talking CO2 is not a pollutant, please. But apparently, private jets produce somewhere between 5 to 14 times more emissions per passenger, excuse me, than a commercial plane, and 50 times more than a train. Okay.
Probably because it's got a little more, testicular power behind it.
No doubt.
All that. Well, it's that toxic, masculinity.
Oh, goes without saying, please. The two. And apparently, there are approximately 15,000 private jets in the world. 2/3 of them are registered in the U.S. But what gets me is, who, and we're not going to say her name, she flew in on a private. And, these people are all outspoken about the energy. And it's possible that she apparently has purchased carbon offsets to make up for her jet emissions.
So we're not going to say her name. Is she like Beetlejuice? If you say it 3 times, she may appear.
It's possible. And she would appear swiftly. Okay. Anyway, the upshot of this is that, and when the big league players flew into Davos in 2022, more than 1,000 planes flew in. Yeah, we care about the climate, but we care about our comfort more than anything. Any thoughts?
Yeah. We care about the climate, so we fly in our commercial jets, and we're worried about the rising sea levels, and that's why we buy homes right on the beach. So yeah.
Wait a minute, isn't there a former president that owns 2 mansions on the ocean?
Yeah.
One in Hawaii and one in Martha's Vineyard?
Right.
Well, given that the sea levels are rising at a catastrophic rate, what insurance company would insure those homes? I kind of wonder. Anyway, any thoughts
Yeah,
on
it's not
the?
supposed to make sense. You're just supposed to believe and be obedient. Weren't you at the meeting?
No, I was not. I guess that's part of my
Yeah,
lack
yeah.
of obedience.
Nothing has to make sense, just as long as you know do what you're told.
Believe what you're told.
And I've got an example of that later on when you ask me
Cool.
about what I've got, because I got like three things, but one of them
Beautiful. Okay.
but one of them you're gonna particularly enjoy.
I like them all. Warhamster, any thoughts?
I do have a thought on this because you're talking about the hypocrisy of the global climate crisis alarmist uh, elite. It's funny, they're still pretending that they're serious about this net zero policy. Uh, I'm looking at a report here out of England that where they have the policy of the this is, remember I told you a couple weeks ago that their entire study of wind power was based on one single year with excessively high winds, and they ignored the average wind of the decade around it. So their assumptions were going to be flawed to start with, but their whole goal is to be net zero by 2050. And we've heard that all the time, net zero, net zero. Well, what's funny about that is that to get there, they have to build a whole bunch of carbon capture plants or whatever they call those things. Turns out that their existing goals in the United Kingdom was only going to be able to um, store about 50 MT of CO2, which is just about 28% of what the report says is needed. So they're basically about three-quarters of the way short to meet their own goals, yet they're still going to wreck the global economy because it, sounds good.
Well,
Eh,
how much energy and how much in the way of materials and the cost to get the materials, transport them, manufacture, transport them, maintain, how much energy is going to be consumed to do this? A massive amount.
Well, they don't factor that in. It's all about the top line number, even though they know they can never reach it. It's never been about actually doing anything about carbon. It's a giant virtue signal. They're trying to hide all kinds of other things under the guise of whatever they want to call the green movement. It's
Now,
it's
now, do you think this is an important topic to discuss?
I think it's one of the most important topics that we can be discussing, period, anywhere in the world, because under the guise hidden behind this whole green agenda is a much more insidious agenda to take away all of our sovereign rights, our individual liberties, etc. Because it's all about the Hegelian dialectic. To give us something to be afraid of, they can incrementally take more and more power, and that's they've had this on the agenda. I find it interesting. I found an article recently. We talked about the first people to really have a try to use the climate as an agenda were the Nazis, and they had a let me see if I can find this real quick. What do they call it? They were worried about global cooling, and it turned into an entire cult in the 1930s in Nazi Germany that basically transformed a lot of the way they did science. And I should have that right here. Great, I'll
Well,
come back to
while you're looking at that, my next wackadoodle actually involves Germany. Now, Germany had this dream. And when I say Germany, I'm not talking the country, I'm not talking the people, I'm not talking the language or the culture. You know who I'm talking about. The leaders. Anyway, they had a dream. They wanted to have 15 million, they call e-car sales by 2030. Well, apparently they figured out this ain't going to happen. And it costs too much. It's not happening. But there's somebody who's taking the lead from Germany in getting this done. And one of the reasons that this isn't happening is because Germany has discontinued its purchase premiums. Oh, if you buy this, we, the government, will give you more money. Okay. Where are you getting the funds, government? Oh, you're taking them from the people. So you take the funds from everybody and give them to a few who bow down to your demands. Well, they were going to get up to 8,000 euros, $8,600 in subsidies. Well, the new leader in this, of course, is Greece. Greece has a pretty high debt load already. They have very high energy costs, especially electricity, and you want to get more people to need electricity. Oh, well, the government's going to help fund this. Once again, this isn't coming out of their pocket. It's coming out of the people's pocket. Just for me, this is more nonsense, because every time I see these articles, I keep waiting for someone to explain, because you know how slow I am. I want you to explain why 420 parts per million of CO2 is so devastating to our climate.
Well, it's
Done.
not.
What?
It's
not? 0.04% is not devastating?
Well, and you keep forgetting this has nothing to do with science. You keep trying to solve it with scientific answers. You're going to keep coming up with the same conclusion that it has nothing to do with science. So I found what I was looking for, and
Good.
this is worth reading. So there's a new book out called Hitler and Stalin's Misuse of Science, when science fiction was turned into science fact by the Nazis and the Soviets. It goes on to say the German Nazi Party of the 1930s and 40s believed in climate change too. It's just that they thought the world was growing inexorably colder, not warmer. Now, here's where it gets fun. I'm just going to read a paragraph for you, and you tell me if you see any parallels to the cult of climate that we're dealing with today. The Nazi iteration of the same basic scientific scam, in which Hitler himself was a strong believer, was termed Weltschlehre, I think that's pronounced all right, or world ice theory. It's called WEL. Significantly, WEL was billed not simply as an ordinary scientific proposal, but as a full-blown, I'm going to butcher this again, this German, Cosmotechnische Weltanschauung, or cosmo-technical worldview, a comprehensive method of viewing the natural world through a highly distorted ideological lens, which merged pseudoscience, philosophy, archaeology, religion, mythology, politics, and racism into one heady brew of cosmic cultural history containing pure vitamins of the soul. If that does not describe the cult of climate that we're dealing with today and the cult of wokeism, I don't know what does. It's the best paragraph I've read all week.
And where did you get this?
This is from the author of that book I mentioned, a guy by the name of Stephen Tucker, and the article was printed in thedailyskeptic.org.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Feel free to
Dougie?
share the link.
Any thoughts, Doug?
No, pretty much.
Okay.
We've seen this over and over and over.
Yeah,
I've got an article from the early 1900s, so concerned that the Industrial Revolution was creating a change in temperature and, trying to stop the coal burning and all that. I mean, this is nothing new.
well, the first example of a lot of this has to do with they talked about peak oil, and the first time peak oil theory was ever rolled out was in the 1870s, and that was by Rockefeller himself, and he'd already monopolized most of the oil fields, and now he was trying to create an artificial scarcity to a product he had a monopolistic control over. And so much of this is about not just profit, but global control and power. And it has absolutely nothing to do with science. But what I found interesting about the paragraph I read, and I thought Doug would think that was red meat, is how they're using pseudoscience to basically redefine the world around us, totally absent reason or logic whatsoever. And that's exactly what we're dealing with today. You look at all the different sciences that have been bastardized across the board, all under the name of the same, green cloak or this green agenda. So,
and we have a society that is trying to fill that void. They want to belong to something. They want to be meaningful in their existence. And so you hand them something and they get all excited because now they feel important. It's an accomplishment that I'm doing something to, quote unquote, save the planet or whatever. And we naturally, as human beings, we naturally have that desire to fill that void that we think we have. Now, as a Christian, I believe that's God that they can only fill it. But if you reject God, and most of the left does, you got to fill it with something. And so they're seeking and they're grabbing and they're yanking. And so why not hand it to them on a platter? Look, you can save the planet. All you have to do is let us control your energy usage. All you have to do is protest, whales breathing or whatever. And they quickly grab onto it. And I think a great example of that is, and I know all of you have probably seen it, and if you haven't, search it out. When Penn and Teller has someone with a clipboard, and she goes into this environmental event to have people, sign a petition to ban dihydrogen oxide, H2O, water. And she's being honest. Dihydrogen oxide, causes excessive urination, it makes you sweat, it's gotten into everything, and people are signing it right and left, mostly left, I'm sure. But so Penn comes on and he explains, are they just searching to be a part of something? And I think that's a large part of it. And I think it's because they've rejected so much truth that lies become appealing.
Well, yeah, and Doug, I think you're spot on. And the point I was trying to make with the connection to the Nazis is that these people will then become religious zealots on a fake religion.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And a religious zealot is one of the most dangerous people on the planet because you can't reason with them. If you disagree with them, you get a violent reaction. They will
you're an infidel and an apostate.
Yeah, that level of extremism is incredibly dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do it on an institutional level with people that have their fingers on the pulse of the powers of government, well, you get to live through what we're living through today. And you're watching it play out. This is no different than the mania of Nazi Germany in the 1930s. It is. There really is no fundamental difference when it comes to the underlying sociology and group psychology or groups.
Yep.
Yeah, it is, and it's important to make that connection because now you understand that. Well, there's not a whole lot of way you can't reason with these people. So how do you deal with them? And that's the scary question.
And Bitterfingers, in the chat room nails it. Just like white coat doctors, trust the science. Have you seen those commercials? Science did that. And not that I'm putting down science. Science is a wonderful thing when it's science. But what they're doing isn't science.
Well, why don't you define what science should be? It's a very simple concept.
Well, yeah, it's basically a scientific method there. You want to learn more about God's world, and you take what you believe, your hypothesis, your theory, and you put it to a test, and then you find out if it plays out or not. And guess what? There's always someone's gonna be questioning. That's how science works. You keep questioning, you keep trying.
So it actually allows for rigorous debate and
absolutely.
It doesn't. Science does not allow for it. It demands it.
Exactly. There is no such thing as
settled
science.
Yeah.
Settled science by consensus doesn't exist because there's always gonna be someone who's gonna say, that may be the case here, but.
Well, for a moment in time, a specific aspect of science may become to be generally understood and accepted. Fine. That doesn't mean tomorrow you don't come back and ask, what? Science properly demands constant evaluation, analysis, collection of information, review, sorting, and maybe coming to another understanding. True science never stops asking why, what, where, when, how.
And science really isn't even coming close to settled until, and Sons of Liberty says this in the chat room, and I was kind of getting to that too, is it has to be reproducible. If you can reproduce the answer each time with your different experiments, then
yeah, you get people, okay, I did this with this, and this is the result I had. Someone else goes out, they try to do the same methodology, duplicate it and get the same result. You may or may
Right.
not.
Now, you
And
guys are being a little heretical because I was reliably told that the science is settled on this topic.
Brady, talk to the guy behind you. Does he look like the science is settled? No. Before we'll
Well,
move on.
he hasn't even evolved into what he's evolved into anyway yet. So,
Well, he seems to be pretty unsettled, so we're going to leave it at that. One thing,
Evolved this.
that's right, baby. In all your reading on this topic, have either one of you ever encountered when this topic comes up and when they're talking about how we have to go totally green and electric and on and on and on, have you, because we're warming, I mean, the warming is out of control. Have you, either one of you read, or anybody in the chat, where the author of the writing or the person doing the speaking mentions that CO2 is 421 parts per million, which is basically 400% and explain why that is so massive, 400%, and that and these are round numbers, it's not absolutely specific, but generally for the last 12,000 years, Mama Earth has been in an interglacial phase. More than 100,000 years prior to the beginning of this interglacial, Mama Earth was in a glacial, and the glaciers is estimated on top of Arctic and Canada were 2 miles thick at the end of the glacial period. Yes, they've been melting for a while. Yes, sea levels have been rising. Yes, sea levels used to be at the beginning of this interglacial time period 400 feet lower. Do anything that you've read or heard ever bring this into the discussion?
No, because they love broad interpretation. That's what they do. They love to broadly interpret the Constitution, and they want you to broadly interpret what they're saying. They give you just enough information for your imagination to go wild. You ask the average person out there just some basic questions. Carbon dioxide has been proven by science to be a danger to the planet. What percentage of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide? I guarantee you the average answer will probably revolve around maybe like 25% or something like that. The average person takes what little information they get, they make their assumptions. Oh my gosh, we're all going to die. I would hate to be a young person in today's society, by the way, because you're not going to grow to an old age. The planet's going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
So why not consider you're a boy or a girl, something in between? There's no future anyway.
Yeah, there's mass movements of people who why would I want to bring a child into this awful world? You know,
and that's the plan. Depopulation too.
Well,
producing.
Yeah, well, going back to Alan's question, they talk about, it's getting warm. Even if you're correct, they ask them to explain why that's a bad thing. Humankind's always done very well in warmer periods and very poorly in colder periods.
You can grow more crops further north. There's all kinds of wonderful things.
Oh, you mean food is good?
That's what I hear. There was during right around the time of Jesus and other time periods in our history, I have read that they actually at different times in history have grown grapes in Scandinavia. So
yeah, there's
a comment in chat I wanted to just touch on from Tim Mole. He says real scientists don't get grants.
well, no, that's awesome.
Well, it's very much true, and I wanted to use that. We talked about this on my most viewed video on my channel ever. I called it the Shadow State Part 7.
And wait a minute, what is your channel? Where just to promote yourself right now?
Oh, it's on Rumble. Look for war_hamster, just like it's spelled on the screen.
Okay.
On the screen today. I may have.
Well, right now it's spelled BRADY, but okay.
And it's war_hamster. I forgot to switch out IDs before joining.
No worries.
So we talked about Robert Maxwell, the ex-MI6 Mossad CIA guy, father of Ghislaine Maxwell. But what he actually did, and we talked about this in this video, is he monopolized the entire peer review process in a scientific journal across many of the soft and hard sciences. And he started doing that in the 1950s. And basically, if you didn't if they didn't like you didn't toe the party line, they didn't like your content, you're not going to get a job. You're not going to get peer reviewed. You're not going to be asked to peer review, and you certainly aren't going to get grants. And that's how science has become so warped. It's because they monopolize and control the entire peer review and and the scientific journal process, and it was not done by accident.
Yeah, my saying on many of my programs has been 100% of doctors, scientists, and educators agree with those who fund them.
It's there.
Very sad statement of the day. All right, we'll move on. You might want to weigh in on this, Dougie.
I might.
You might.
I'm looking forward to it then. Go ahead.
Okay. Apparently, there is a new executive order coming out of the administration. And you know how executive orders are commands and demands to the entire population, correct? Is that correct?
Keep going.
No.
Get there.
No. Isn't that correct? I mean, the president says something and everybody else has to bend a knee.
Because he's a ruler. Oh, yeah, of course. He's the king. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've talked about is executive orders are communications to the executive branch, not judicial, not legislative, and definitely not to the country. Yet where is media today on this topic? Oh, the administration gave an executive order, so we all have to follow it. The fourth estate is turning into a massive failure. They're supposed to report facts, not promote agendas. Anyway, executive order is now this, I don't know if they meant this, but this could be considered a intended pun. Executive actions aimed at addressing critical issues of gun violence. Interesting use of the word aim.
Well, they didn't mean to put gun violence in their crosshairs. Go ahead.
Yes. They want the U.S. Department of Education. Now, where in Article 1, Section 8, the federal government have the constitutional authority to create the Department of Education? Okay.
Right under where they have the authority to do all the other stuff they're doing. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, doesn't exist.
They want to promote safe firearm storage. So they're going to spend time and money and effort getting a letter out to school principals. Then the Department of Justice, that's in the same section that the Department of Education is, Article 1, Section 8. They want to release an extensive guide on safe firearm storage. And they want to offer expertise on storage devices and best practices. Really? This is what we need.
But you mentioned education earlier. They're not going to ask the children how their parents are storing their firearms, are they?
Don't know. No,
they've tried to do this before. And they do try to do this. One of my grandchildren actually had one of her teachers ask her if there was any firearms in the house.
Whoa.
The first answer is none of your damn business. But see, the reason why they do that, and this goes back to what because earlier Brady is comparing what's going on today to tendencies and tactics and strategies of Nazi Germany. Mm-hmm. Guess what? That's what they also did back then. Have the children turn in the parents.
Well, in Nazi Germany, who could not own a firearm?
Well, it began with just certain smaller groups, like certain groups like Jews and people like that. Yeah. But it continued to expand until by the end of the war, pretty much just about everybody, unless you were a loyal Nazi supporter.
Anyway, the article goes on, but the upshot of this is that he wants to direct his cabinet to propose mechanisms for federal assistance, once again aiming to address short and long-term needs of survivor victim families, first responders, and affected communities. I'm sorry, how is this the federal government's business, Doug?
Yeah, it's right there under Article 0.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I have a gun item issue kind of sort of later on to also mention, but go ahead, continue.
Well, real quick, Doug and Alan, I don't want to go deep on this now because I also have a quote unquote gun issue. Doug, if you bring in the same one, I told you I had an interesting topic for you. But if you're bringing the same one, I just can't wait to get to it because I've got a lot of fun things. Let me ask you this way: does your issue have anything to do with Hawaii?
No.
Okay, good. Then we've got
You were nervous, huh?
then we've got two fun issues.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go on. Yeah, we're back to the environment. I know we seldom touch on this here. And why do we touch on this, Brady?
It's probably the single most important geopolitical conversation to be having of how the globalists are trying to take over the world and everything you own, and you will own nothing unlike it. And they're actually trying to enact it as we speak.
Well, actually, you'll own nothing and be happy.
No,
Even
yeah.
better. Even better.
It's John Lennon. You know, there'll be no possessions. So, you know,
Yeah.
just
Well,
imagine.
according to this article, scientists, and this is in different places around the world, are now doing what was once considered unthinkable with the goal, we got to cool the planet. One of these is taking place in Australia. And they are, where is it? They are, and they're using these big devices to spray a briny mixture through high pressure nozzles into the air with the attempt to brighten low altitude clouds that form over the ocean, because these brightened clouds will reflect the heat back. And this will help cool the planet. Does this sound like climate engineering?
Just a bit.
Geoengineering?
Yeah, well,
And
they're looking at doing something similar in Massachusetts where they want to dump a bunch of chemicals into the ocean to try
yeah,
to.
in Massachusetts, the Woods Hole
Oh, we know about the same thing. Go ahead. I'm excited.
They want to pour 6,000 gallons of sodium hydroxide, which happens to be a component of lye, into the ocean 10 miles south of Martha's Vineyard in the summer. And this apparently will act like a big Tums tablet, lowering the acidity, which will allow the ocean to absorb 20 metric tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. Okay, this kind of begs a few questions. If you change the acidity of the ocean, and for some reason that allows the ocean to absorb more CO2 out of the atmosphere, well, why did the ocean release the CO2 into the atmosphere? Is it because the planet's been warming for over 12,000 years? Isn't it heat that comes before increase of CO2, not increase of CO2 and then heat? Yeah. But let's not talk about we're in an interglacial period. Let's not talk about
Alan, quit questioning. We're experts. We know what we're doing.
I'm sorry, what?
I said, quit questioning. We're experts. We know what we're doing.
Heretic. No, didn't these people didn't these people start off trying to save the whales, and now their windmills are killing half of them because they're killing their sonar, and now they want to wipe out the photoplankton, which is their number one source of
See, now you're a conspiracy theorist.
Well, I happen to like whales. I got nothing against them. I at least have nothing against them.
Yeah, so make sure that whaling is illegal, unless of course the whaling is done by windmills. All right.
Well, okay, it's not okay to just whack birds out of the sky unless you have a windmill farm that whacks them out of the sky. That's okay. we want to reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, and we happen to, I think the science is settled on this, maybe not, but I think it's pretty settled that trees and plants consume CO2, which means they would take it out of the atmosphere. But in Scotland, because certain people really wanted to put up the spin, they cut down 2 million trees. 2 million CO2 absorbers.
I thought they used to try to save the trees.
That's why they call it the green movement.
Right.
Well, and the thing is about the ocean, get back to that. You know what the largest producer of oxygen on the planet is? Plankton in the ocean. So, not that I've looked this up, but so that would then seem reasonable that then the greatest consumer of CO2 would be plankton in order to turn it into oxygen.
So
kind of like a plant.
Well, that's what plankton is. It's a microscopic plant.
Yeah.
I think you're onto something, Doug. The reason they call it the green movement isn't because they like trees or plankton or anything like that. It's because when they get rid of all our food sources, we're all going to eat Soylent Green, and that'll be it. It'll be, basically human sludge will be our food source. That's the plan.
See, I'm seeing something different. I think it's called the green movement because these people want all the green. They want the money.
And I think it's called the green movement because they want us green, looking green after what we have to eat after they give it to us.
You mean after we die? Okay.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, but Alan, is a central bank digital currency green or is it just black and white?
Actually,
I've got a central bank digital currency story, by the way. But anyway, continue.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, that happens to not be any color because it's merely a digit.
And see, you're wrong.
I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're wrong. It's not a color. Because
I didn't say it was a color.
I have it on good authority
Yeah.
that it turns out, and we didn't know this until the Fannie Willis
thing
deal, and when Dad said what he said, central bank digital currency must be white because it's racist, because storing cash is a black thing.
It's just
so that means that it's racist.
Okay. See, saying it's white is not attributing a color to it. It is more of a social status connection thing.
Yeah, but everybody knows everything evil is white.
Doug, you should listen to your source.
Wait a minute. Hold on, Brady. Hold on. Wait a minute. Everything?
Everything.
Clouds are evil?
They must be white supremacists too.
Snow is evil?
Well, until you pee in it.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Good to know.
Brady, I must be evil. I must be listening. Well, I didn't catch what you were going to say.
Well, you should trust Fannie Willis's father as a source because he swore under oath. And this is a former lawyer, judge, prosecutor, whatever. He had a very distinguished career in there in Fulton County. He told us on the stand that he knew that COVID was going to be absolutely deadly in 2019.
Right. So, yeah, we saw that too. Yeah,
is that before it happened?
But my favorite is still that CBDC is pretty much racist because storing cash and hiding cash is, a black thing.
Okay. All right, we're gonna switch gears a little bit, but this is pretty important. Have you ever heard of the New Hampshire Interscholastic Athletic Association? No.
Well, I've only been here for 6 months and I haven't heard of it yet.
Okay, well now you are.
You're going to now.
Yeah. So, and this happens to be basically the group that runs high school sports in New Hampshire. And there is a person who won the girls' high jump competition.
What's his name?
Last name Jacquees. I don't know how to pronounce the first name. But he won because you see the NHIAA.
Oh, see, there you go. Already you're discriminatory. They won. Okay, go ahead.
No, he won. I said
yeah,
he
they
won.
won. Yeah.
He won.
I already asked what his name was.
Yeah. Anyway, the NHIAA. See, this is where it gets really important. So, this shows the kind of care we're talking about, is committed to providing transgender student athletes with equal opportunities to participate in their athletic programs consistent with their gender identity. What about the non-transgender students who only want to compete with those of the same sex? Well, apparently this takes precedent. Well, some parents are finally getting fed up, and they may have half the school districts in the state organized into a new interscholastic association and tell the other one, bite me. So you got parents finally standing up to, okay, to me, if you want something fair in this topic, that, okay, and they'll tell you that, oh, well, the person who is a guy by birth at the moment of conception decides he is female, therefore he gets to compete against females, and we are going to drug down his testosterone to a level that is typical of a female. So there's a typical female level of testosterone, and this person doesn't have it. Doesn't that tell you this person isn't female? Anyway, we're going to drug down the testosterone. What they don't seem to deal with, which is the other side of the coin, is who has typically more estrogen in their system, females or males? You want to guess?
I got to guess.
Go ahead.
Males?
No, females. Females actually have more
But there's no
estrogen.
difference. You shouldn't have to change estrogen and testosterone if there's no difference between boys and girls, right?
Listen to the biologist.
Yes, thank you. Anyway, so
Yeah.
let's say ballpark, a female will have, again, depending on the time of their life, but a female will typically have maybe 5 times more estrogen in her system than a male.
Right.
Well, if you're going to drug down the testosterone, why aren't you drugging up the estrogen? It'd be very interesting to see what happens to that body.
I know one of the answers to that is almost every single one of the estrogen altering drugs, whether it be to suppress it or add to it, seriously increases your chance of colon cancer if you're a natural born genetic male, also known as a man. So they really
Well,
can't make estrogen of a
yeah.
man. It increases your chance of colon cancer.
Well, congratulations to the people in New Hampshire, the parents who are finally standing up to this nonsense to protect their girls. I'll tell you what would be interesting is that, imagine for a moment you have a family and they have what we would call a typical boy and girl. And let's just say they're twins, but not identical, of course. And they compete in the same sport. And eventually Johnny comes home and says, I'm Janie, which means I'm going to now begin to compete against my sister, Debbie. And you could say it's in swimming, okay? No physical contact or anything. And the sister is really, really good. And the brother is not that good unless he's swimming against the sister and he can always beat her. Well, the sister is so good that she is going to compete in one more meet and get a scholarship to college. But her brother, now identifying as female, is going to swim against her. And he beats her. So he gets the scholarship and she doesn't. And that family is going to back this. This is how crazy it's going to get.
Those kinds of consequences are across the board for leftist ideas. I've got another story later on I'll talk about where the consequences are similar in that sense, but they won't recognize the consequences because it's the fair thing to do.
What is fair about having, okay, let's talk about fair.
Well, we don't want to hurt their feelings.
Well, okay, let's get really silly for a minute. And let's stay in
as if the world hasn't gotten silly enough. All right,
right.
go ahead.
Let's stay silly, and let's say that we're talking about wrestling. And in wrestling in high school, I think there's somewhere around 8 different weight classifications because you're trying to make it relatively fair. I mean, you don't have a 120-pounder wrestling against 140. Well, what happens when the 140-pound wrestler says, well, I identify as 120? Well, if we don't have a physical reality between female and male, then isn't weight subjective too? Isn't it about how you feel about your weight? Any thoughts?
Where's my social security check? I identify as 72.
Well, that's what matters, is what you identify as.
So I got a few thoughts on this, Alan.
Okay.
A few thoughts.
I actually have heard a bit about what they were doing in New Hampshire. I'm sorry, but you actually said it wrong. It's not New Hampshire. It's now called New Hampshire. So we need to pronounce it.
Okay. My apologies. My apologies.
If that's allowed, just don't do it again, please. The second part, the town that I live in is definitely going to be on the one that stays in the athletic association where chicks with dicks get to beat up genetic girls. So good for all.
By the way, they had that addictomy surgery, but anyway, go ahead.
That's good, Doug. I haven't heard that one. I like to tell this story. I grew up. I was a basketball player as well as I played a lot of sports. But I'm 6'3". I was a pretty good high school basketball player. Not good enough to play Division I college. There's a girl I grew up with who's 6'2", and she ended up playing on several national championship Stanford teams and a couple of Olympic teams. So she was a darn good female basketball player. She every once in a while, she grew up in the same neighborhood as I, and every once in a while in high school she'd come down and play with the guys. She's creme of the crop for women's basketball. Well, we would, she wants to play with the boys. We treat her like one of the boys, and we would smack her around, elbow her. She got her butt kicked, but she was so much tougher when she went to play with the girls. But the difference, and just because even not even fully developed men, we're teenage boys, we're just so much. There's just a difference in the genetic structure of men and women. And this gal was one of the best players in the world in women's basketball, and she could not hold. 2 years later, she's on the Olympics winning gold medals, and she could not hold her own with a bunch of average to above average high school basketball players. There's just a gigantic difference, and they're trying to do this whole thing in reverse, and I blame it a lot of this garbage on Hollywood. They keep trying to show all these scenes in every movie where these women warriors can beat up men, and that's not the real world. There's not a woman who ever lived that could handle a physical confrontation with a fit, well-trained man. We have different bone structure, different musculature, and it's fine. It doesn't mean men are better than women. It just means we're different.
And it means in those situations, the man is going to, for lack of a better way of saying it, come out on top. But that doesn't, and there are roles that have been established for exactly that reason. They're not just some social structure kind of social construct, because women are not, also because they know what their bone structure is they're not naturally, for example, going to lean towards joining a construction crew, for example. They're probably going to be more likely to take on jobs that are more in line with what their talents and what their abilities are, and men are going to do the other jobs. I worked in construction for 20 years, and once I came across a woman who was a framer, and she was bigger than all of us, but women are not breaking down the door to get into construction. That's just because and it's because of structure, it's because of ability. I have a friend of mine who's a firefighter, and he says, while women can be firefighters, men, you get a young man to join a firefighter, a firehouse, you're gonna get a good 20 years out of that guy. You'll get 2 or 3 years out of the woman before she's unable to continue at that pace. It's not to put anybody down. That's the reality. If you are in a burning building, do you want a big guy to come up and throw you over his shoulder to carry you out of the building, or do you want some woman to do it? I'm 230 pounds. I don't think a woman's going to be able to carry me out of the building.
She's going to push you out.
But
and hopefully you'll hit.
It's not political. That's just reality.
Yeah. Anyway, so to me, last thing on this, if you want to be fair and provide opportunities, if you've got a bunch of born males who say they're gals, then create a whole new section for them. Don't put them up against females.
Yeah, I think someone in chat said that just about a minute ago. I'll see if I can track it down, give them some credit.
Any more than any more than you would put a able-bodied person because they now identify as special needs or paraplegic. Okay, well, I identify that way, so that's who I get to compete against. We're never going to do that. It's beyond the realm of physical reality. So leave the female sports, the girls and the women's sports alone. If you're born as a male, you know it. Your parents know it immediately. If for some reason you have a psychological thing, fine. We'll create a whole new section just for you guys. And then you can have your fair competition. Leave the females alone.
So you brought up a funny conversation I had with one of these morons recently. We made the mistake of talking about, the gender you're assigned with at birth. The doctor could have made a mistake. I go, just out of curiosity, what factors do you think led the doctor to make that assignation in the first place? Do you think maybe he checked out the baby's genitalia? Or, is there any other factor that could have made him assign a certain gender at birth? The person couldn't answer that. There was well outside the realm of a practical question. So,
well, the way I would phrase this is because I don't like the term gender, the way it's being used. It's being misused. Our sex as human beings is determined at the moment of conception. This isn't something that happens eventually. It's not something that gets assigned after you're born. It's verified, but it's determined at the moment of conception. That's sex, biologic, female and male. Now, the term gender is being used and it's being thrown all over the place. And I learned from Doug, okay, if you want to know about a word, go into an old dictionary. Now, I don't have an ancient dictionary like Doug has, the one from 1320 when he was a kid. I don't have one of those. I do have one from the 1960s. It's a quality dictionary. I decided to look up the word gender. The first definition applied to that word is the classification of nouns. For example, in English, we have the word friend. In Spanish, the feminine gender, amiga. The masculine gender, amigo. In German, Freundin and Freund. These are genders, classification of nouns, not human beings. But they keep misusing a word to push an agenda. And part of the point is to push the agenda. The other point is to wipe out the reality of our biology. The biology is carved in stone. Any thoughts?
But see, biology is something that's created by God, and we must destroy God. So therefore, biology must be flawed and changed.
Well, it's people's understanding of biology, and now we're going to get it right. All right. There's been so much wackadoodle news. I know we were going to talk about this one. Doug, I think you're very up on this one. Apparently, I know you're going to find this shocking. So I'm glad you're
Nothing
sitting.
shocks me anymore.
I'm glad you're sitting down because I don't want you to fall over.
Okay.
According to a report that, and this was after a 15-month investigation, Special Counsel Robert Hur, H-U-R, said in a report that he opted against bringing criminal charges following the 15-month investigation because Biden cooperated and would be difficult to convict because he's a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Okay, now we know the ultimate defense for any criminal activity. I'm old and I don't have a good memory. Any thoughts on that one, Doug?
Not fit to stand trial or to sit on sit in a chair next to a judge, but fit to be president. How does that work?
I don't know.
No. Here's something that was funny because I saw this in a meme, but I could so see this in a conversation with a lefty. I could so see it really going this way. And in the meme, it says that Biden's doctor has found him to have some mental decrease and memory issues. And the lefty says, well, there's something wrong with that doctor. That guy's an idiot. Says, well, what about Trump's doctor who said that he was perfect? Or no, I did that wrong. Yeah. I did that wrong. I did it backwards. He says that even though Biden has mental deficiency, he's still fit to be president. And the guy says, oh, that doctor's a smart doctor. He said, well, what about the doctor who thought that Trump was fit and able to carry out his duties? So, well, that doctor's an idiot. It's the same doctor. And that's kind of the way they look at the world, because, and I've been saying this for years, the answer to the question is not one thing or another. It's what benefits the Democrats or the left or the globalists or whatever you want, whatever label you want to give them. The answer is not what is true. It is what best benefits their movement at the moment, even though it contradicts what they said 10 minutes ago. It's all about narrative. That's always the answer. It goes back to science, right? The answer in science, the consensus, is not what is true science. It's what most benefits the funders and the narrative and the cause and whatever else you want to call it. That's what it comes down to. And this is, and I'm not saying anything that none of us know. This entire audience is aware of this attitude, but I don't think we take it seriously enough, because what has happened is not only do they shift the answers to benefit the narrative, most of the uninformed people out there don't realize it, don't notice, don't care, and they believe it. That's why it's so serious, and it's just a matter of paying attention. I can't count. Well, my wife right now is reading a book, Persecution, by David Limbaugh. It's written 20 years ago. It's talking about the stuff that's going on today and the beginnings of it 20 years ago. And my wife says to me as she's reading it, I didn't know that was happening 20 years ago. She wasn't paying attention. She didn't notice because, you know what? I've got to make dinner. I've got to go to my job. I've got to, to attend the soccer game for my kid and da-da-da. And I'm not saying those things are bad things. I'm saying that we are so distracted. We don't care. We don't take them serious because we believe what we've been told. And we also believe it because we've been desensitized to believe it. Things have been removed from our culture, things that make us a virtuous society, and we have come to accept those things. It's the boiling frog discussion, if you want to get into that. It feels like a sauna until you start boiling, and by then it's too late. And that's what's going on. It's creeping incrementalism. And I know we all know this. Once again, I'm not telling this audience anything they don't know, but we apparently haven't taken it seriously enough, because it's advancing like cancer.
Thank you,
What you
Doug.
talking about? what you talked about, Doug, it's called objectivity. If you can't judge, quote unquote, your own side fairly, because it's
Hmm.
more about tribalism than actually getting to the truth. You're part of a religion and you're not actually engaged in objective debate. That's one of my favorite tools when engaging with those type of people is challenge their objectivity. You get them to state a principle and then apply it to their own side and see if they can stay consistent. And the people we're talking about never can. And one of my favorite quotes is that if your principles are not consistent, they're not principles.
Hmm.
They're not. They're conveniences.
No, they're justification. Uh, they're temporary arguments that can change on a whim. But
Okay.
you brought up this Biden scenario, and I'd like to touch
Yeah.
on it real quick.
Oh,
There's
please.
a couple things aren't being talked about enough. First of all, why did Robert Hur put that into the report and put Biden in a lose-lose situation? He's either incompetent and can't stand trial, or he's competent and can't be president. And now you see the mainstream media actually, a lot of it actually reporting on it. CNN, MSNBC, although they're not 100% all in, but the hit order came out that Biden's time is over. He's not going to be on the 2024 ballot. It looks like it, very likely. And that's actually showing up in the betting odds across the people that, if you track the political betting odds, Biden's chances of being a candidate have gone down. It gets interesting. Who put
Yeah.
out the hit?
Well, that her report and his latest press conference changed a lot of people's minds. I can't count how many pundits I've watched where they said, if you would ask me 2 or 3 weeks ago who was going to be on the ballot in November, I would say Biden. Now, after the her report and after that press conference, it's not going to be Biden. And I've even started to kind of do that because I know this is a stubborn man. He doesn't just step down for the fun of it. He's and he's in he's easy for the puppeteers to utilize because of his condition mentally. But and so I've always believed too. He's going to be on there and he's going to be their main puppet. But I too am starting to wonder if he's going to be on the ballot. Now that said, everybody then says, well, Gavin Newsom's next. Well, he's too hard to control. While he agrees with them, he's too strong-minded. He can't be controlled. So if he decides he disagrees with them, not that he would often because he's one of them, he's not able to be controlled that easy. That's where I get back to, I think deep down they really do want Biden to be that guy. He's easier to control.
Well, I'm gonna take a little bit different opinion on Gavin Newsom because he's been controlled by the Geddes family his entire life. He owes everything he is to the Geddes family, one of the 5 richest families in California who control most of the waterworks in the state, and that's a whole nother conversation. Gavin Newsom's always been a puppet. He's been placed everywhere he's been. He's the spokesperson for the Geddes family. So yeah, I think he's very controllable.
Okay.
Never done anything on his own. But I want to go back into the timing. Well, first of all, who got Robert Hur to put that out? And Dan Bongino speculates, and I think his arguments are sound, that it was an Obama hit, and that it was not. So who was Robert Hur? Well, let's see where he came from. I believe it was Maryland. He was in the Department of Justice, and the person he followed was his mentor, a guy by the name of Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein, although he's a registered Republican like Robert Hur, was absolutely one of the integral forces of the entire ClimateGate, Russiagate scandal that happened. So basically working for the Obama Clintons. So this is not a guy that is a Republican objective judge of character. He's a political player. And if you hear Robert Hur, you got to think Rod Rosenstein. And none of that Russiagate stuff would have happened, or much more would have come to light if Rosenstein was an honest actor. So,
Okay.
so the next question is the timing. We're basically about 6 months out from the Democratic convention, where it would make sense for Biden to step down and say, "Look, my health can't permit it. I'll finish my term. Someone else needs to step in as a candidate, and they could replace him at the convention because the Dems always rig their conventions." And it could
Well, and that's a good point because people have been asking me, can they do that? And I've told them, the party rules are the party rules. That's nothing to do with the Constitution and the law. It's what they do. And I did a little digging, and absolutely they can at their convention, the way they've got their rules set up. He can say, you know what, I can't do it. I nominate this guy to replace me. And all of his delegates then go straight to that person. they don't have to go through the delegate process again or voting. It just automatically transfers the way the rules are set up.
Exactly, 100% agreed. And the last point I wanted to make, well, the second to last point I wanted to make on this, because it's an important topic, is the timing of it. If they were just going to replace Biden at the convention, they would not have allowed this Her report. They wouldn't have wanted to get out. But they did let it get out, and Her did put that in there. And if we're correct that he's working for the Obama faction, this pretty much eliminates Michelle Obama as a candidate for the last time, because the reason you would do it before the convention is the replacement candidate has a whole year to get national recognition. People in California know who Newsom is. People in Michigan know who Gretchen Whitmer is. People in Illinois know who Pritzker is. Those are the three names besides Michelle Obama that are getting thrown out there. They need a lot of runtime to become nationally known names, and people get to know them so they have time to promote. Michelle Obama doesn't need that lead time. Everyone knows who she is already. She's always been a national figure, and the Democrats love her. If she was going to be the candidate, they would have waited till the convention. And that brings up my favorite topic, point about this, is the Democrats' biggest issue with replacing Biden is someone named Kamala Harris. Because if he steps down, prior to the convention, she's now an incumbent, historical first woman of color vice president now in the presidency, and there's no way they can leapfrog her. There's no way they can leapfrog her for the candidacy. The only way they can get rid of her would do something crazy like push forward the Kamala lawsuit. And they can't do that because that would basically mean Obama was illegitimate. So they have got a major problem of replacing Kamala or leapfrogging her. And I have no idea how that's going to play out. I'm sure they have a plan, but I've thought through every scenario I can, and it's going to be really bad optics to shove her aside, because she is as dumb as senile Biden is. Kamala's even less electable.
Gentlemen, thank you for those insights. I appreciate it. One more bit of, normally don't get this long on Whackadoodle, but we had so much today. This one's very important. It's coming out of France. Maybe you haven't heard about it. France recently passed a law, and it penalizes critics of mRNA treatments. And that the parliament passed a law that introduces severe penalties for those opposing mRNA injections or other treatments recommended by the state based on current medical knowledge. You can get up to 3 years of imprisonment or a fine of 45,000 euros. It's been called the Article Pfizer. Heard anything about it?
I've seen the headline. I have not read about it or know much. So
somehow, if you happen to disagree with the state, and because the supporters of this argue that we're in the face of an unprecedented global health threat, and this is how you ensure public safety. You have to prevent the spread of misinformation. Somebody disagrees with the state, you're a harm, you're a problem. You have to be found guilty, and you have to be punished. So we have to we have to take what they tell us is, collective safety, and put that over individual rights. Any thoughts?
Well, it kind of ties into something that that's also emerging in Germany at the same time. Germany is establishing a early recognition unit to detect far right and foreign disinformation campaigns as early as possible. Minority Report. And they're going to do it mainly through right-wing extremist financing records and plans, and to detect any movement on that front so they can identify who these right-wing far-right extremists can be, because Germany's domestic intelligence agency says the number of far-right extremists has been rising. In 2022, it reached 38,800, with 14,000 of them considered to be potentially violent. Now, understand something. They clump neo-Nazis in with quote unquote far right. Of course, when you ask them to explain why they consider fascism to be far right, they cannot explain it because they never define their terms. It is just something that we've been convinced of and been told that's the way it is. Nazis are on the far right. Now, if you look at a true political spectrum, the far right are anarchists. Largely the right are people who believe in pure democracy. Constitution is dead center. Everything else is to the left of the Constitution. And fascism would be far left. It's no different than socialism in the sense that it seeks control of the means of production. It's just the means of how they do it that's different. So this ties into what you're talking about. Any dissent will not be tolerated. Now we could use far right, far left. We can, talk about all these political things, but really, there's only one word that really describes it fully: Orwellian. Go ahead, Brady.
No, I got nothing to add on this one. There's nothing I haven't already said on this channel. I mean, it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I've been reading chat over in Vaughan. Teresa C said something interesting. These geniuses are descendants of the ones who brought us the French Revolution. No, not the brought it,
Exactly.
but the Jacobins who co-opted the French Revolution. And
Well, that's interesting though, because then I have to ask, how far away is the Reign of Terror?
It's one of the things in history that really is unique about America's founding is almost never in history have you found a group that won a revolution, changed the philosophical nature of how the country was run, and did not go on a purge. And when that happened in 1776, in the years, whatever, 13, 14 years it took to really found the Republic, it had a chance to be the dawn of a new age, a Republic revolution. And whispers of this were coming up through the cracks all over the world, that this idea of self-governance could actually work. And the French Revolution was the next one up on deck, and it gets co-opted by, call them leftists, call them authoritarians, the Jacobins, whatever you want to call what these people are. But it was done on purpose because they wanted to make sure that this whole idea of republic revolutions would not take hold. And it's because the French Revolution was so bloody and so awful, it actually kept a lot of revolutions from happening because people did not want that to happen in their own countries.
Well, the Jacobins, what they did is they changed two things when it came to their revolution, and these were the key factors that made the American Revolution successful. They changed it from being about individualism to a collectivistic push, collectivism. And they were so they removed individualism and they removed God, and it became all about secularism. Now, I don't blame them. Getting rid of the centralized established church was a good thing, but they figured the only way to get rid of the established church was to go anti-Christianity completely, to just get rid of God, make everything secular. And by doing that, they removed a critical foundational principle necessary for a successful, prosperous political system. Or as George Washington in his farewell address said, that religion and morality are essential supports for political prosperity. And without them, this whole thing falls apart. If you don't have a set standard of morality and a belief system that it's founded upon, you're not going to go anywhere except for into chaos, and ultimately to oligarchy, tyranny, dictatorship, and bondage. And that's what happened. So I tell people all the time, that's the difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution: individualism versus collectivism, godliness versus secularism.
Now, it's going to be a very important lesson when we take this country back and start restoring the republic. It's going to be a very important lesson. So we should start talking about it now, because I know an awful lot of people that are well-meaning patriots, and they're out there, trying to shop online for wood chippers, and helicopter rides. So that is not the long-term solution, unfortunately, because there's a lot of people that do deserve that treatment. But it's when it's like, I want to use one of my favorite football analogies. When you cross the goal line, score a touchdown, act like you've been there before.
Been there, done it.
Yeah, win with grace and dignity, and never go against your own values. But there's going to be we're not going to avoid some level of ugliness and accountability. So
Finally, on this topic, this idea that we're going to take on quote unquote misinformation by eliminating or restricting freedom of speech. Why not just have an open conversation and let people come to understand why what is being said is not accurate instead of forbidding it?
Because they might come to the wrong conclusions and hurt the narrative.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't get that. I didn't get that.
Freedom
part.
of speech means freedom of speech, and we were talking about this last week, and I talked about this on my Tuesday show a couple weeks ago. Freedom means freedom. That means you have the freedom to be right, you have the freedom to be wrong, you have the freedom to be good, and you have the freedom to be pain in the butt. Now, obviously, there are going to be certain limits because we do have laws that are in place, and laws are necessary in order for us to have an orderly society. But beyond those laws, our lives is none of government's business. And if I want to say something or believe something or put out that I believe something, that's my business. If people want to agree with it or disagree with it, they can. In the end, you got to let the culture do what it does. You've got to let the culture weed out the garbage. And it's not government's job to adjust our behavior, to ensure our behavior, or to determine how we're supposed to behave. It's none of their business. Right, wrong, or in between. And by government doing what it's doing, by them doing what they're doing, they are actually violating the First Amendment. No, I'm not talking about violating freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, or freedom of petition government for redress agreement. I'm talking about the Establishment Clause. They have established a religion of what they believe. And if you are an apostate, an infidel, you are to be destroyed, you are to be shut down, you are to be arrested if you show up on a certain place on January 6th. You will adhere to the established religion or you will be targeted.
Well, it makes complete sense because if you don't listen to and follow the narrative, then that means you might be out there thinking, questioning. We can't have that. We cannot have the lemmings thinking outside. You have to follow because we are the elites. We know what's best for you, and we will always do what's right for you until it's not convenient for us.
Now listen to the high priest who right now can't figure out which room he's in.
And the woman who was going for the seat on the Supreme Court who couldn't define what a woman is. Isn't that what she said when she's asked what's a woman? Well, I'm not a biologist. Anyway, Brady, I know you have something to talk about.
I have got a fun topic, and this one promises to be controversial.
No, what?
So
Here?
yeah,
No,
so
no.
I'm actually going to tick off some of the people in the chat if I don't preface this conversation properly.
Okay.
So I'm just going to ask a couple of short questions. I'm going to ask a series of questions, and you guys give me some brief answers.
Okay.
Speed up. No need for a long explanation, but brief answers.
Okay.
What do you think the bluest state in the union is today? The least likely to vote for a Republican?
Massachusetts. Maybe Hawaii.
I'm going to go Hawaii because that has the most blue sky. Okay.
I'm not sure about your logic there, Alan, but Hawaii I would agree with as well. And that's what this is about. No, Scott D12, it's not Washington State. That's just a state that has mail-in ballots in Seattle. Most of that state is very red. I got friends there and grew up very near there, just like Oregon. And California. It's a mail-in balloting that makes them blue. No, Hawaii is, when it comes to voting percentages, if Trump wins in a landslide of 49 states to 1, Hawaii will be the one that is the one.
Yeah, Hawaii and Washington, D.C.
What is the number one reason that they put the Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights? What is it that they feared?
They feared a federal government that they were creating that wasn't in existence yet, that they were creating would become overpowerful and threaten the existence of each of the founding states. And they had that fear because they dealt with the monarchy of England.
That is mostly correct. Doug, do you want to correct the one thing you got wrong? Or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, the federal government was already in effect because the Constitution had been ratified. The Bill of Rights came 2 years later. So the Second Amendment was created after the federal government was created. So, Alan, you misspoke just a bit, but you were absolutely right of what they feared, that the Second Amendment was a protection against a tyrannical government. Doug, would you agree?
I agree.
What was, Doug, this one's for Doug. What was the bigger protection against a tyrannical federal government? The one word answer I'm looking for, but
Militia.
I would say federalism,
Hmm.
which means the states created the federal government, not the other way
Well,
around.
enumeration doctrine, considering that they would follow it, but that's where the militia comes in because they ultimately were not going to someday.
Yeah, well, that's probably two of the same checks for the same purpose. The militia was to make sure that the federalism could actually be allowed to function. I bring this up because there's a recent Hawaiian Supreme Court case that has lefties just celebrating and has gun rights people furious, and it should be the other way around.
I know what story you're talking about, but go ahead.
Well, I'm going to read the headline. This is from Bloomberg News, what they're talking about. It says Hawaii rightly rejects Supreme Court's gun nonsense. In a scathing takedown, the state's highest court declared there is no state constitutional right to carry a firearm in public. And they were actually correct. The state does not have that law written in there. Now, everyone, Alan, Doug, and myself are 100% right to bear arms advocates. So we're not saying what's going to come out next does not dispute that in any way, shape, or form. But this has to do with federalism. And the lefties are all happy because they struck down a gun law. But what Hawaii is actually doing with this is saying the Supreme Court ruled against the gun law, and we're just not going to follow it. What are you going to do? That's nullification, and that's federalism. Now, every state should be doing that across the board with federal laws left and right. And you've got the bluest of blue states setting this precedent out of nowhere, and all the wrong people are celebrating it or denigrating it for the wrong reasons. Because federalism is the biggest shield we have against central government tyranny. And that's what just happened from Hawaii by striking down. Their Supreme Court is saying, we're not going to do it. I'd like to read Hawaii's Constitution, Article 1, Section 17, the right to bear arms. Tell me if this sounds familiar at all. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's verbatim out of their state constitution.
Where did they get that?
Actually, they got it from the U.S. Constitution, which got it from the Virginia Constitution, right, Doug?
Correct. And the thing is, and it's interesting. I didn't know if they had transferred that language verbatim, and I do know that all 49 of the states have very good gun rights language. But when it comes to the average argument out there that we're going to hear about when it gets to this discussion is someone says, well, they violated the Second Amendment with their state decision. No, they didn't. They may be by not allowing you to access your arms, carry your arms, keep and bear arms. So they're violating your right to keep and bear arms. That's a God-given right. But they're not violating the Second Amendment. It goes back to the state constitution. Now, that said, state constitution is saying that the person has a right to keep and bear arms. So actually, the language in the state constitution does say that you have a right to conceal carry because that's what the word bear means.
That's a great argument. I don't want to go down that one today because it's a fun argument, and that's not where we're going with this. But
Okay.
I happen
But
to
you are right though. It's in the end, it's up to the state to decide what to do with this local issue. Gun rights are a local issue, state issue. It's the purpose of the Second Amendment was to keep the federal government out of that issue. That was the purpose of it. So you are right in that area right there. I agree with you 100%. I'm just
don't jump ahead of.
fascinated by the fact that the language is identical in state constitution, yet they don't see it as saying what they think it says or doesn't say.
Well, I'm more concerned with. Okay, well, remind me, what year was Hawaii admitted to the Union?
Now, what was that? 49, 50,
I thought it was 48.
48? No,
I could be wrong. I didn't look.
I
Look,
think it was 50 actually, 1950, I think. But anyway, go ahead.
and remind me, what year was the Bill of Rights put in place?
1791.
That's when it was ratified. Yeah.
Yep. So if the Bill of Rights and the Second Amendment applied to the entire state, to all the states, why would Hawaii have written that language into their state constitution in the first place? Wouldn't they just have said, when it comes to gun rights, refer to the Second Amendment?
Because even at that time, they knew that the Second Amendment only applied to the federal government. And this is after the so-called incorporation doctrine began to spread throughout the country.
And exactly what is incorporation, Doug? Because this is where I'm going with this entire reason I brought up this case.
All right. So the according to the preamble to the Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights was offered, proposed, and ratified for the purpose of disallowing the federal government from misconstructing or abusing its powers. In other words, it applied to the federal government. And even your most liberal historian will say, in the beginning, that was the truth. The incorporation doctrine comes from the 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868. The idea was, since you have the due process clause, which basically says life, liberty, or property without due process shall not be taken away from anybody, that includes rights. And since in Section 5 of the amendment, it says that Congress shall enforce these provisions, that means that it's up to the federal government to enforce the Bill of Rights against the states. That is called the incorporation doctrine. It was rejected in the debates in Congress, so it was never intended to mean that. So when you don't get what you want legislatively and you're the left, what do? You apply it through the courts. And that's exactly what they began to do, beginning with the slaughterhouse cases. This idea of incorporating the Bill of Rights of states now, both sides believe it. Anytime a state says something about the Second Amendment that we don't agree with, oh, they're violating the Second Amendment. No, they're violating the right to keep and bear arms. Second Amendment applies, the language in the Second Amendment applies to the federal government. This is not to say that the states can stomp all over your gun rights. That's not true. It is a natural right. It is yours. But the language of the Second Amendment applies to the federal government. Shall not be infringed means shall not be infringed. Every single gun law at the federal level is unconstitutional. States are allowed to have some gun laws, and it's up to the people to make sure they don't go too far.
Perfect, Doug. That's exactly what I wanted to hear during the conversation. I'm going to
Wait a minute. All I have to add is that Hawaii became a state on August 21, 1959.
59. Oh, I'm a decade off. Okay.
was that before or after they started making the surf movies?
That is before the surf movies.
Oh, weren't the surf movies 50s? Are you saying those were the 60s?
Early 60s. Beach Blanket Bingo, early
Well, Alaska
60s.
then was 58, right?
Well, since that would be the 49th state, I'm going to go yes.
Yeah, I believe they were like 1 year apart when they were added to the Union.
And I'm pretty sure Alaska probably has some really good gun law language, but I'm not going to look it up right now. The point being, if the Bill of Rights applied to everything, it's what do they call it? The supreme law of the land. Then the states that followed thereafter would not have bothered putting that language in their constitution.
Right. Correct.
It would not have. It's self-evident. So I wanted to jump into this Hawaii Supreme Court decision, which, by the way, was 5-0 unanimous. There's some language in here that's interesting. And again, all the wrong people are celebrating or getting mad about this for the wrong reasons. That's why I wanted to bring this up. So I'm going to share my screen. So early on here, it talks about the Bruin case, which was the New York gun case. that came right after the Dobbs case, when we thought that the Supreme Court was going to start moving more towards federalism. If you look at the Bruin case, the most important assenting opinion was done by Clarence Thomas. And he said the Supreme Court, if you're going to get back into federalism, let's go all the way, which is what we need to do. But the excuse me one second, I got to sneeze. Try to do it up. I'll try to hold off. I don't like to do that on camera.
Yeah, the audience thanks you.
Your camera thanks you.
What they say here is the Bruin case snubs federalism principles. Still, the United States Supreme Court does not strip states of all sovereignty to pass traditional police power laws and to protect people. Well, that's something I 100% agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And they're right that Bruin snubs federalism principles, because the federal court does not and never had the power to tell states what to do in their own internal business on these issues.
Has anybody informed the Supreme Court of that condition?
Oh, a few times, but we haven't heard a really good case. Well, we've heard a few good cases lately. It's given that this is the most closest to being a federalist conservative Supreme Court we've had in more than a century. Some of these cases are going to start coming forward, and that's why I keep bringing these up. It's a big deal, because if you get if you get incorporation out of our legal interpretation, it opens up so many cans of worms. So much of what happened in the 20th century can be reversed overnight.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal for restoring the republic. I'm going to scroll down to page 8. There's some other fun language.
And while you're looking, Scott in the chat room corrects me. Alaska was January 3rd, 1959. Thank you.
Appreciate that, chat. Okay, so here's another interesting bit of text. We hold that the text and purpose of the Hawaii Constitution and Hawaii's historical tradition of firearm regulation do not support a constitutional right to carry deadly weapons in public. Look at what they're saying, that is Hawaii's Constitution is actually supreme in this case, not what the Supreme Court ruled. Now, if you start taking this precedent of states saying their Constitution is supreme over the Supreme Court, or is, supersedes the Supreme Court, and that's the way it should be, yeah, we've just brought us back to being a constitutional republic. Conservative states, red states, should be doing this left and right, challenging federal decisions being handed down. This is a big deal. There's more language like this. The state argues about, sorry, that's not the one I'm looking for. I've got about 2 more to say the same thing, but it's over and over again. We have a liberal Supreme Court of the state of Hawaii making the argument for federalism. And that is a can of worms that the leftists don't ever want to let that genie out of the bottle. Because once it gets out, I mean, that's it right there. Now you've got state nullification of federalism happening left and right. This decision is fascinating, reading through the whole thing, if you look at it through the right lens. And again, the leftists are celebrating the fact that, they, basically, made it harder to carry guns. Well, yeah, they did, but they did it inside their own state. It's how they did it.
Right.
And again, like I say, the right to bear arms, the Second Amendment, was put there so we could protect ourselves against a tyrannical central government, not because we're worried about a tyrannical state government, although California ought to reconsider that.
Yeah. Now, if the state does become tyrannical, then it's the citizens of that state to correct that law and where it's going. And so it's up to the people of Hawaii, if they don't like that decision, to work on changing it, because it's a local issue.
And that would be state nullification within the state.
Was that the completion there, Brady, on that?
That's all I wanted to present on that.
Because if something come up in the chat, I wanted to make a
Thank you so much, Brady.
Of.
Thank you very much.
Something came up in the chat. I want to make a quick mention of. Gavin Giant says, technically Britain has a constitution, but we didn't write it on one bit of paper that could be misconstrued. We use laws from common law. Well, the problem with that is common law is changed by the whims of society and judicial opinion and judicial precedent. So they're misconstruing it the same way they do the Constitution. The only difference is you have no piece of paper to defend what is supposed to be there because it was never written down in the first place. It just changes.
The other thing is that with the Constitution, tell me if you agree or not, gentlemen, the citizens' rights are known. They're written out. What a citizen gets to have, gets to do, gets to be, and where the
they're
federal,
enumerated.
yes,
And they're not enumerated to show what the citizen has. That's not why they're enumerated. They're enumerated to tell the government, by the way, these are the rights, don't touch them. And
right.
then in the 9th Amendment, if it's not written down, you can't touch those either.
And the 10th Amendment.
And that goes to states' rights.
So to me, when you don't have, let's say, an official recipe that, you don't get to touch this without changing the contract, then you don't have what you think you have, because if you're dealing with the whims of a system that is potentially continually changing, or one judge does one thing and another judge does something else, well, that's your common law. That doesn't bring security. That brings change. That brings vagueness. That brings potential conflict. Knowing what the contract is, says, and follow it, now you have some security to your individuality, your liberty, your freedom, and your rights. That's what's essential about the Constitution for me. So we get away from the argument of what do I get, what I don't get. It's here. Now I know you don't get to touch this. You can get involved here. It's simple, but you don't get that surety or that continuity and consistency out of common law. What do you think, Doug?
I think you pretty much nailed it, Brady.
No, I've teed it up. You guys are running with the ball. It's a really important topic.
Well, thank you for that. I got lucky. All right, I got one I want to talk about, because I've written about this, and I think this is real. And Brady, I'm very happy that you took your stand on how important climate energy stuff is. I really appreciate that. Well, I'm going to say, in that same vein, this one is really, really crucial. I've written on it. Have an article at The Flame. You can check it out, theflameusa.com. Doug, you've spoken on this. Natural born citizen. 3 little simple words. Apparently, a lot of people have a hard time understanding what they mean. There's been a lot of discussion. People bring up birthright citizenship. And we've talked about this before, but I'm going to bring it up again. We're talking Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, Clause 5. It's really short. And this is about what has to happen, or what has to exist for a person to be eligible to become president and ultimately vice president. Just to be eligible. Now, you have to be 35. Okay. Back then, that was probably a decent age, and they figured, okay, you've got some life experience. Good deal. You have to be 14 years in the country. Think about what they're talking about. They want people who have been here and who have developed a loyalty to the country. Because you had a lot of people coming in and out, a lot of Tories. You had to be in the country for 14 years. Those two issues are pretty much undisputed. The big one is natural born citizen. And what I find really powerful about this clause, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, is the way it starts. And there is nothing in my mind that is vague about how this clause starts. No person except. Is there vagueness here, Doug, Brady?
Not at all.
Okay.
It's pretty clear.
no person except a natural born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of president. The first thing that's important, apparently, in this is that you're a natural born citizen. But if you can't be a natural born citizen, you have to be a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of the Constitution. That's because there were no natural born citizens at the time of the adoption.
Well, there were, but they're all 11 years old or younger.
Well, I guess it depends on when you decide when the country begins.
1776.
Okay.
July 4th. We
Well,
celebrate it each year in July, you may have noticed.
yeah, but Doug, did that actually found the United States of America, or did the United States of America was not actually founded until the Constitution was ratified?
No, the government was founded at that point, but the country itself was established when we declared our independence.
How do we draw the difference? What's the distinction?
It's just a governmental system. I mean, you know, the country existed. It began with a governmental system that was just the Continental Congress. They said, hey, we need a governmental system. They began writing it in 1776, 1777. They finished writing it, got ratified in 1781. That would be the Articles Convention.
Articles of Confederation.
Articles of Confederation. Sorry, thank you. And then they realized it wasn't good enough. We need another government. So it's the new government. But I mean, you know,
I would make the argument 1776, what they established was 13 independent colonies established.
States.
Sorry, they became independent nations. Sovereigns. They were independent sovereign states declared at the same time a united front as they all declared their own independence from England. There was not a country being founded. We were not a nation at the time.
And so not only independent from Britain, but independent from each other.
Exactly. So when did that change? When was the actual nation founded?
I will stick by my argument that the moment they declared independence, because when they all signed that as a union, they became the United States of America. Now, granted, they saw themselves still as sovereign entities in the beginning that were under a union, so it wasn't a nation. The word nation would suggest it was a national government, and they saw themselves as a union of states, a country united. Though the system was not a national system, it was some other kind of system. It was a confederation, but nonetheless, they considered themselves a country. So as a country, again, our birth date was July 4th, 1776.
Okay, my turn.
I want to make that argument. We got to do that another time because it's a really fun argument or discussion.
Yeah, I'm not going to probably budge at all, but nonetheless, you can voice all you want.
I'm going to jump in. Now, you know, I'm slow, so I have to read things because I'm slow. Where do you think I am? You're right. I'm at the end of the Declaration of Independence. Let's see what they said in 1776. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, that these united colonies are and right ought to be free and independent states. So that's in the Declaration of Independence.
Free and independent states, but they also said representatives of the United States of America.
Right.
Also establishing it as a single entity. It was a union of free and independent states under one umbrella, the United States of America.
So either way,
I never thought I'd hear Doug agreeing with Abraham Lincoln so strongly, but continue by all means.
Thank you. Appreciate it. The important point is that Article 2.
Brady, you suck.
Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5
is
very specific and very powerful and very definite in its opening. No person except a natural born citizen. Now, no one alive today was alive at the time of the adoption of the Constitution, which means we can put that one away. And we are now focused on natural born citizen. If they meant to be just a citizen of the United States, natural born citizen wouldn't be there.
They wouldn't have used that language. And if they just meant someone who was born on American soil, a native born citizen, wouldn't they have written that instead of natural born citizen? So
And
apparently there's something special about natural born citizen.
and I'll let you talk about it. We have like 10 more minutes. For those who really want to get into this, and Doug knows the history better than I about how many volumes of Emmerich de Vital's The Law of Nations was at the convention. Apparently there were 3. It was published in 1758 in French. It was translated into English 1760. Emmerich de Vital was a Swiss diplomat. And you want to go to chapter 19, section 212. That's where he discusses a natural born citizen. And what's really important is, and this is where Doug and I may disagree a little bit, because the way I read what he said, and I'm going to read it, the natives or natural born citizens, he's using a plural, are those born in the country of parents who are citizens. And he later goes on to that the children naturally follow the condition of their fathers. The way he wrote this, and you got to check it out for yourself and read it, to me, and later he clarified that it's not where you're born, it's who your father is, not your parents. When he uses parents, that's because it's plural, because he's using citizens and he's using children. It would have been really clear to me that he meant mom and dad if he would have said a natural born citizen is somebody whose parents were from the country. Either way, at the minimum, your father needs to be a citizen of a country of the U.S. if you were to be a U.S. natural born citizen. And the idea is
Immigration and Naturalization Act is worded very similarly of citizen parents. Doesn't say
but can an act change the Constitution?
Well, it was clarifying the language. It wasn't changing the Constitution. It was clarifying the language. For a piece of legislation to be made, if something's not understood, they used it to clarify the language. Simple as that. But my question is simply this, though. My question is based on this. I am told by those who disagree with me that parentage has nothing to do with natural born citizens. So either way, whether it's dad or both parents, we're being told it's all about being born on the soil.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Once again, if that's the case, then in that clause, would they not have written native born rather than natural born?
Yeah. The thing is that
and Bill West, that's inaccurate. He said, don't forget, women didn't vote at the time. That is inaccurate. 10 states of the original 13 did allow women to vote. Single women. Married women, a marriage was considered a union, therefore they became one, so it was one vote, and the man was representation. So married women didn't vote because they were disallowing women from voting. Women didn't vote, married women didn't vote because the vote was already being cast as a couple. As for single women, if they could show that they had at least $50 worth of property, and that didn't mean just real estate, they could vote in 10 of the 13 states. All right, go ahead.
Thank you. The upshot is that it was having an undivided loyalty to the country. That to me was the profound fear. You didn't want somebody who grew up with parents from a different country who developed a loyalty to something other than the United States. And that's why at least the father must be a citizen of the U.S. to be a natural born citizen of the U.S. If you're saying that you are that natural born citizen and the citizen are the same, then it doesn't make sense the way that clause is written. They differentiated between natural born citizen and a citizen at the time of the adoption of the Constitution. So to me, that doesn't work. And the other thing is, if it's just being born on the soil, regardless of who your parents are, then wouldn't all the Native Americans, the Indians, wouldn't they all be natural born citizens? Right? Because they're born here. And their legacy goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. Well, no, they weren't considered citizens. Before you can become a natural born citizen, you have to be a citizen. And just being born here doesn't mean that you are a citizen, because just because you're born here doesn't mean you are subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And there's one person who, her mother was from India, her father was from Jamaica. And according to the Jamaican Constitution, no matter where you're born, you're a Jamaican.
Right. The chat room has brought up something that gets brought up often in these conversations: dual citizenship. Dual citizenship, while is recognized around the world, is not recognized technically by American law. When you naturalize, for example, you have to renounce your old citizenship, your old allegiances. The United States technically is not supposed to recognize dual citizenship. That's in the law. Now, do we anyway? Typically, we do. I think it's something like a quarter or an eighth of the members of Congress are dual citizens. It's a huge number. Most of them, with the countries, they're not necessarily just European, but nonetheless, dual citizenship at the time would not play into it, and it shouldn't play into it. The idea is that you're uniquely and exclusionarily have your allegiance with the United States.
But even if you were, well, if you're a dual citizen, but you started out as a U.S. citizen and then you're another citizen, I don't know if you can do that, but that would be a divided loyalty.
Was it Ilhan Omar or was it Talib, Rashida Talib, who just a couple weeks ago, in the last 2 weeks, said was talking about we Somalis, and
Yeah, that was Ilhan Omar.
yeah, we
Yeah,
Somalis,
she actually places the welfare of Somalia over the United States.
and she actually wears it. Yeah, she actually flies the Somali flag outside her congressional office, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
as well as an American one. I wonder which one's higher, but I guess we don't really have to guess with that. Um, I'm hoping something is done about that person at some point in time.
Crazy. Before we go on, and because I don't like to rush it, Deggy, promote yourself and
Yeah,
introduce us to your new co-host.
yeah, he jumped up on my lap. There's nothing I could do. This is Petey. My wife calls him Princess because he's a wuss. But anyway,
God.
and he loves attention. He's an attention hound. Um, but anyway, Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution, douglasvgibbs.com. I have two radio programs, one on KMET 1490 AM on Saturdays from 1 to 3, and kprz.com, Saturday nights at 9 p.m. You can also find that show on all of the podcast networks. Just enter Mr. Constitution Hour, and you'll find it on Audible and iHeartRadio and Spotify and so on and so forth. The list is long, over a dozen. I am also a blogger, although I've not been doing it a lot of late because I'm trying to get 2 books out as soon as possible. My history book is essentially done. It just got submitted, waiting for approval, and then it should be available within the week. It is a promise of truth self-evident. Part 1, U.S. American History, Part 1, Early American History, and I go through from the Saxons all the way to the election of President Jefferson in that book. Part 2 will be the 19th century. Part 3 will be modern history. And then I'm also working on another one, and I'm without giving out the title and all that just yet. It's basically about Biden, and I'm trying to get it out there while the election season's still going. And so douglasvgibbs.com, become a patron. See where it says join when you go there. $9 a month helps fund what I do.
And listen to the radio. Grady, please promote.
The main place to find me and my best content is on my Rumble channel, which is war_hamster. Just put out a new video today, the 8th edition of my Shadow State series. This one's called Recolonization, the Corporate Side of Operation Gladio. I did that with Colonel Towner Watkins, who's at the Colonel's Corner, and she's fantastic co-host. for these kind of geopolitical, uh, historical conversations. So please check that out. You can also get me on Twitter at war_hamster1776. Please look for the 1776. There are other hamsters running around that space. Get me on True Social at war_hamster.
Thank you for that. Hey, Dougie, do you think once you and I get pretty good at this, that Brady will have us on his show?
No, I doubt it. He's a prima donna.
Okay. Well, hey, we can hope, right? We can hope.
Alan, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but you guys are on my channel because I do put the For the Republics up there every week.
I know that. I know
we're,
that.
We're getting 600 or 700 views on average per week over the last couple months since I started posting again. And I've actually had Doug on for a one-off show. We're hoping to do more of those.
Yeah, we need to do more of that for sure.
Well, one day I'll be good enough to be on. Okay.
You just have to come up with the right topic. That show I did with Doug, though, that's like that was Can They Keep Trump Off the Ballot? That's up to almost 2,000 views. It's like one of my top 5 most popular shows. So we're doing something. We're doing something right.
For me, on Saturdays, I am on radio. Happens to be Constitution Radio, 1 to 3 p.m. But see, I'm on KMET 1490 AM. AM stands for America.
Yeah. I think I've heard of the guy who hosts that program.
That'd be you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just don't say the channel name right. Okay. And of course, here on Sundays, very, very, very fortunate to have Doug and Brady here. And we can have this roundtable type of discussion, looking at the same thing from different points of view. And you will find articles that I've written on the Flame. It's a physical newspaper. You can subscribe. Go to theflameusa.com. My most recent article is coming out in March, and it's on that 4-letter word, democracy. I talk about it.
Yeah, I want to respond to Cultivator 63 in the chat room. He says that KMET used to be a rock station, and that's true. It was a rock station when I was growing up in high school. I listened to KMET for my rock and roll music, and then KMET stopped rocking until I joined it. Now it rocks again because I'm on there anyway.
And
yeah, I've got a couple of other co-hosts. Yeah, some obscure guys, Alan Myers and Dennis Jackson. Is that what you want?
No.
Yeah,
Dennis.
You're so needy.
Dennis, the voice Jackson.
The voice.
Come on.
I already started putting together also what I want to talk about next Saturday. I've got Brady, I know you're not in California, you don't care about California anymore. But Alan, did you by any chance see the debate between 3 Democrats and one guy who thinks he's Republican named Steve Garvey? He used to play baseball.
I didn't know the circus was in town.
Yeah, and Adam Schiff indicated that the federal minimum wage should be $25 an hour. Barbara Lee topped him and said, no, it needs to be $50 an hour because that's how much it would take in order for the average person to survive in the current economy.
Okay, great.
And I'm going to go back to Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell said if the Democrats understood economics, they wouldn't be Democrats. And then the other one is, remember that bill that I told you about, how they're trying to kind of eliminate the militia because, we shouldn't have any paramilitary groups?
Right.
A Democrat suggested that if Markey's law passes, that it would also, thank God, get rid of church security, armed security, because that would be considered paramilitary groups. And he said that right after the shooting in Texas at the Joel Osteen church,
these people
where 2 security guards that were armed took care of business.
These people
are these people out of their mind?
These people are allowed to walk around without keepers?
Yeah.
It's crazy. I see Chris is in the house. And we're
Alan, can I jump in real quick to rebut something Doug said?
Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah.
You're not a prima donna?
I don't even know how to spell prima donna. No, first of all, I do care about California, and I will be flying in next week. Looking forward to seeing your class as a student on Thursday. I will be there. Second of all, about Steve Garvey, and we've got to bring this up. As a San Diego Padre fan, it irritates me to no end that they retired the jersey of the lifelong Los Angeles Dodger And that alone will keep me from voting for him. But
Well, he was
that
with the
being said,
Dodgers longer. He became a star as a Dodger. And then, you know what you call a new Padre? A former star. And
yeah.
then just Padres that get traded, you know what you call those guys? New
New
stars, because they become
stars.
stars after they leave the Padres.
How are those Angels doing?
I don't want to talk about it.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank Douglas and Brady for being on the show. Alan Myers here. This has been another episode of For the Republic. To all you good people out there, lovers and defenders of liberty, freedom, rights, individuality, equality of opportunity for all. Yeah, you patriots. You know who you are. Until next time, may you be and stay safe and well. Patriot out.